Hey, do you love Christmas? I do. But think about this. What if Santa all of a sudden decided to call off Christmas? Well, our next speaker is going to discuss that very thing right here, right now. My name is Vincent T, and our next guest is Jeremy K. Brown. Jeremy, let's talk writing.
Sounds good.
Hey, tell me about you. Who are you? What do you do? What part does writing play in Jeremy's life?
It plays a very significant part. I've been a professional writer for 13 years. I started writing for a biography magazine down in the Bronx in 1999 and freelancing for local papers, things like that. Worked my way up to the WWE, where now I serve as one of the deputy editors of their monthly magazine, WWE Magazine.
So this is World Wrestling?
That's correct. Yes.
World Wrestling has a publication.
We do.
And that's where you come in.
Absolutely.
And you work on this publication. You do what, like a column or a...
Well, I'm the deputy editor or co-deputy editor, and we oversee every facet of the magazine from inception all the way to publication. So we design the magazine from scratch, basically.
So writing isn't just a fancy. It puts bread on the table for you.
It does. It does.
Oh,
I'm very lucky to be able to do that, and I enjoy it very much.
And you've been doing this a long time.
Yes.
And then you decided somewhere along the line that you can write your own book.
Well, I've always written. I've always done fiction on the side for my own enjoyment, with the goal of one day publishing and one day getting a book out there. And so this has been something I've been working towards.
So Calling Off Christmas isn't your first book. I understand you've also done biographies.
That's right, yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, there was a publisher in the city, Chelsea House, that I worked with extensively for a few years. I published 3 biographies, one on Stevie Wonder, one on Amelia Earhart, and the other on Ursula K. Le Guin, who's the science fiction author who wrote the Earthsea books, among many others. And I also wrote a book on Michael Jackson, but that was not published because the company ended up folding and going to an all-digital format. So someday that book may see the light of day. I don't know. Oh. But in the meantime, those 3 books are currently still available.
Well, you know, biographies are very close to me. One of the things that I've been doing for a while is talking about Sybil Ludington with biography. One of the things with Sybil Ludington that I discovered very quickly is that it takes research. And there's a whole lot of homework that has to be done for writing. What kind of homework do you do for your biographies?
Everything, basically. Well, let's start with Amelia Earhart as a great example. I went out and I got just about every book that I could find on Amelia Earhart, and any movies or programs or biographies, documentaries about Amelia Earhart. I watched all of them, read the books, you know, as much, I mean, not everyone cover to cover, obviously, but as much as I could, and as well as obviously these days with the internet, there's plenty of research to be done there, plenty of information available there. So my process is sort of just starting at the beginning with the simplest thing of just, you know, reading the books and getting the basic story down and saying, okay, this is the timeline of her life, and then filling in the gaps from there with all the internet research and the you know, documentaries and all that type of thing.
One of the things that always has amazed me about writers is that writers are very different. And they have a profile. And some writers write in the morning, some writers write in the afternoon, some in the middle of the night. I'm a middle of the night guy. If not, I would be out doing a million things. Middle of the night, no one's around, I get to do some writing. So the time of day, the place. When I first did Kissed Candy Days Goodbye, I did it at the kitchen table in longhand. Tell me a little bit about Jeremy's profile. What do you do as a writer? Who are you as a writer? What are some of your habits, your styles?
Well, in terms of my process, which is what you were referring to about where and when and how you wrote, the goal I set for myself is 500 words a day, because that's achievable. If you just say, I'm going to sit down and write a book, you're never going to do it. And I've learned that. So what I do is I say, just 500 words. And if you do that, you know, every day, you're going to get 2,500 words by the time, if you start on Monday, by the time you hit Friday, you're at 2,500 words.
Good discipline.
And that's going to grow. And it's amazing how easily achievable 500 words is. So that's the goal I set. I don't always get to it because I've got 2 kids and a wife and a career.
But you have to set it as a goal.
Yes.
Yeah. When I first started writing, I had a friend who was a writer, and she said to me, Vin, you want to write a book? Here's what I want you to do. Write a poem a day. And I said, well, I don't really do poetry. She said, shh, you're not listening. I want you to write a poem a day. If that poem a day grows to 2 or 3 or 4, it does. But you must write a poem a day. She was absolutely right. I did that for about 3 or 4 months and started writing my novel. Discipline.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need to get there to that computer. Tell me about writer's block. You know, I work with a number of writers. Writers get so nervous and they're like, oh, nothing's coming. Is writer's block, does that affect you?
It doesn't, actually. I know that sounds arrogant to say, but I'm going to explain it. If you stick to that 500 words a day, and you stick to that discipline, the writer's block goes away because it doesn't have to be perfect. The rule I have, this is what I call it: first draft, worst draft. So you know, your first draft can be as horrible as you want it to be. You can fill it in with whatever awful stuff you can think of because you're going to fix it in the end.
Right.
So I always write to stay ahead. I don't look back. I just write those 500 words every day until I'm done. And then I look back, and usually what I see needs a lot of reworking, but reworking is manageable.
We've spent a good deal of time together in workshops at the Mahopac Library, and you've been a member of that workshop for a while.
Yes.
And you've heard me say 100 times about the first page and the last page.
Absolutely.
When you write the first page of your book, you continue, you write the last page of your book. That's when you go back to do the first page again. You didn't know what you know now at the end of the book when you started your first page the first time. So it's very important. And it's also very important to know that you need to change, revise. It would be wonderful to think that wonderful books sit at the edge of your brain, they fall out on the paper, and they're ready to be a bestseller.
Yeah.
That happened?
Not yet. Not yet. You know, I would love for it to, but no, definitely not. It's a real process, and it doesn't stop even with the second draft or the third draft, and it takes a lot of time to get it to that place.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you. Now you're working, writing for a living, and somewhere along the line, Santa Claus comes into your life.
Yes.
Tell me, when did this book get born? Now, I know that this cover no longer exists.
That's right.
So
yes.
we'll talk about that too.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit about the inspiration for this book.
Right. Well, it started actually on Christmas Eve, 2007. I was just thinking about the coming holiday and thinking about how much it's my favorite time of year. I love Christmas, love sharing it with my family. And it's just always been a wonderful time. And I just started thinking about all the things that mean the most to me about Christmas and how I could funnel that into a book, into a fun, interesting story. And I started thinking about Santa Claus. And I said, here's a guy who's got a lot of pressure. You know, he's got to deliver gifts to every house all over the world in 24 hours. And he's dependent on people believing in him in order to get all this done. And people are always questioning his existence and all this other stuff. So all of those things started, interesting me about what is this guy really like? What makes him tick? And I wanted to create a somewhat flawed Santa Claus, a guy who maybe sometimes doesn't always enjoy the job, doesn't always enjoy the pressures of having to live up to the expectations of the world and being the patron saint of Christmas. And I thought, what if it just got to be too much for him? And he said, you know what, I'm done. I deserve a break. I've been at this for thousands of years. Leave me alone. And then it got me thinking about the Environmental Protection Agency and global warming. And here he's got a factory up in the North Pole on the ice. That probably can't be too good for the environment. So the EPA factored into it. And originally it was going to be a little bit more of an environmental book. And ultimately, that story didn't interest me as much as Santa's journey from despair to belief again, which interested me much more just as a writer.
Now, we touched on research. Did it take much research to do this book? Did you find yourself having to do some homework, some pre-writing work for this book?
Some. I mean, a lot of it came really just from the heart, from just years of being a fan of Christmas, loving Christmas music and Christmas specials and Christmas books and all those other things. And so not too much. There was some research in terms of things like at the beginning of the book, it sort of details Santa's approach and landing back at the North Pole. The book begins the day the day after Christmas, where Santa returns to the North Pole after a rather dispiriting Christmas experience, and that's when he decides to hang it up. So there was some research about the geography of the North Pole, what's around it, how that would actually work, because I wanted to make the North Pole a functional place and have it be very realistic. So I talked about how the machinery works, how the presents are wrapped, how the elves work, or how the reindeer operate. They're sort of treated very specially because they have a very special job to pull the sleigh. So how people handle the reindeer, all those things. So there was some research in terms of that, in terms of just how this place would actually work. But beyond that, it all just sort of came from inside.
Now, you also have an advantage over some other writers in that you have some built-in readers in your house.
Absolutely, yes.
Talk to us about that.
Yes, well, in terms of, for this book, definitely, thinking about my two kids and their experiences with Christmas and the magic of Christmas. And my wife and I always have enjoyed sharing that magic with them, and that's something that we love to help foster in the house. So they were definitely in mind, thinking about them and thinking about things that they would enjoy and stuff. I always say my number one audience is my wife. I write everything for her. When I think about writing, and I think about writing a line or a sentence or an emotional hook, something like that, I say, what's Allie going to think when she reads this? And that drives me. And so in this case, I had that. That's always the engine that drives my writing, is inspiring her and making her laugh or feel something, but then also thinking about the kids and what are they going to think when I take them inside the North Pole like this. So yeah,
I'm going to talk just a little bit about that, bouncing your book off other people, and I know a number of writers need feedback and you want to know, am I on the right track? Is this happening for me? And I know you do that in the workshop.
Yes.
You come in, you read pieces of it, you get comments, and you've given some wonderful comments to some of the other writers.
Thanks.
Now, tell me a little bit about that. Have you always found people to share your work? Do you find that it's an advantage when you're able to say, hey, listen to this idea? I know I do that. I did that when I was younger. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. You read to the milkman. I don't even know if they have milkmen anymore, but the milkman, the mailman, anybody who will listen.
Yes.
Were you like that at the beginning?
At the beginning, when I first started writing, which was a long time ago, I was very excited. I had to show everything to everybody. And if they didn't think it was brilliant, then I was crushed.
Exactly. And that's a danger. And that's a danger I always like to make for writers. Be careful. Because sometimes you go out there and you read to people who don't read. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's good. That's all right. And you say, God, it must not be very good. The person wasn't that excited. So you have to be very careful. Good feedback is important. Bad feedback could kill you.
Yes.
So you have to be careful.
Yes, definitely. Now, my wife, Allie, is always the number one person. I show her everything first. And I usually don't show her until it's done, until it's ready. Because I'm afraid if it's not good, or if she doesn't think it's good, it will stop me. And even if she's giving constructive feedback, it will still, this isn't any good. So I wait till it's done, and then I say, now there's no turning back. The barn door's open. I got to get it out there now. And then I really value her feedback, and because her emotional response is important to me. Say, this is a book that reached me on this level and made me laugh here or cry here or whatever it is. So So then I take it to another friend of mine, Chris Mari, who's a writer as well, and he and I have actually authored a book together, which we're hoping to get out at some point soon. And he gives me the intellectual response, sort of the very measured, non-emotional, this works, this doesn't, and sort of in a much more, he's a book editor by trade, so he gives me that sort of
that helps.
Very rote, very measured response, and that's very helpful. So I get both feedback on both fronts, sort of that really gut level emotional response, and then I get sort of that, more, grammatical editorial approach, I guess I would say, from my friend Chris. And then, of course, there's the writers group at the library.
There you go.
Where that's where I road test the book, and I make sure the wheels aren't going to fall off. You know.
Have any of the writers ever made a comment where you said, "Wrong, I'm just not going to listen to it"?
Once in a while,
but most of the time they're right on.
Most of the time it's valuable, and even if it's criticism that I don't agree with, it says, okay, that to them that passage or that section didn't speak to them the way I had hoped that it would.
Right.
So even if I don't agree with maybe their suggestion, I'll say somewhere along the line it hit them in a wrong way. So maybe I should reevaluate.
Okay, so you don't change everything about your book just because someone said I don't like it.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Good.
But I do value every piece of criticism that I get.
And it's good to get feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Have someone to bounce your ideas off. Okay, let's go back to the process. So you have this idea, you're going to write this book, and you sit down and you write a chapter, done, tomorrow I'll do another chapter. How does that work?
Yes, I never look back. I always sort of describe it as putting the tracks down as the train's coming up behind me. I just keep going because there's the train is the voice in your head that tells you to stop. It says this isn't good, this is silly, and you're writing a book about Christmas, about Santa Claus. There's that voice in your head that could say this is too juvenile, this is too kiddie, this is not working. But I said I know there's something here, and so I just write as fast as I can to stay ahead of that criticism, which every writer I think feels, and I just keep going, and then when I'm done, then I look back.
Some of our writers in the workshop write a chapter, and they read it. They're not crazy about it, so they go back to the beginning of it, write it again, and they don't move the chapter 2 until chapter 1 is perfect for them. That's not the way you work.
It's not, no, and I think that everyone has to find their way, and I think if that works for you, that's great. For me, I love, if you have a horrible first draft, it's still a first draft. You have a complete book that you can work with. If you have one perfect chapter and 200 blank pages, for me, it's not as satisfying and it's more daunting to work with. Okay, I got this right, but look, all this I still got to do. If I have 50 horrible chapters, I still have 50 chapters, and I can fix them.
Let me ask you something. Writers ask me this all the time. They say, should you start with an outline? Do you?
I don't. My friend Chris, he does. He outlines everything to the letter, and he will not put one word on the page until he's had it completely planned out, and that works for him, and that's great. For me, and maybe there's a sense of impatience there. I want to get it done, but I always liken it to driving, where you can only see as far as your headlights can go. You can get to your destination that way. You're not going to know every turn, but you can see enough just to see the road
to get you there.
Yeah, so that's how I look at it. It's like I kind of have an end point in mind. I know where I'm going to go, and then I just see where the journey goes from there.
Yeah, I remember an author saying exactly that. The author said, you know what I love about writing? I get writing, and I'm the first one to know what's going to happen. I want to see it unfold. I want the excitement of having a general idea of where it's going, but not knowing till I get there.
Right, yes.
And that is what I do too. I have a sense of where I'm going. What I generally tell writers is the best thing to do is have a sense of where you're going. Have a sense of your ending. You can change it 10 times before you get there.
Absolutely.
But put something up there to aim for, because if you don't, that's where writer's block happens a number of times.
Exactly.
You're going, and then you're like, where do I go from here?
Right.
And you're not sure of where to go. So you should have a sense of it. Change it if you like, but have a sense of where the book is heading.
Exactly. And that's the myth of writer's block to me, that idea of I don't have anything. No, you do. You're just getting caught up in the process and the gears of what you think you should be doing. Just write, and just write anything. And it will happen. Yeah.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I also tell writers is that you have to let your characters help to write this book. Breathe life into your characters, and then let your characters live through the end of the book. Now, did Santa come to life for you? Did Santa kind of help you find the ending?
Yes, definitely. And I think because I projected a lot of myself into, as every writer does, into their characters. And so his journey of losing faith and then reclaiming it was, a very personal journey, because I think it's something that everybody has felt at one time or another of, what am I doing this for? Why am I in this place and not that place? And what have I done wrong, or what can I do right? Those kinds of things are, I think, questions everybody asks themselves. And so that sort of fueled the journey of the character. And as the story went on, he felt much more depressed, I guess, as I was, and I said, I don't like this guy too much. So I had to scale it back a little bit and kind of get into his head a little bit more and say, he's not really depressed, he's just disillusioned, and he sounded much more cranky in the first draft and much more just, I don't know. And even the main character, Jin, through whom the story is told, he was much more spoiled and much more combative. He was challenging everything Santa said, and again, his character came to life as I went along, and his story changed, and he became a lot more relatable to the reader, I think. And that was one thing, again, the benefit of showing it to my wife. She said, I don't really like your narrator too much. He's a spoiled, rotten guy. And I said, yeah, you're right. Yeah. He was always talking about, they moved to a farmhouse upstate, and he said, I can't live here. This is filthy. This is dirty. And I said, he sounds like the spoiled rich kid. And I said, yeah, you're right. And so then, it changed.
One of the things about your book that I really like is the human aspect of this Santa, and what it's like to be human. There's also kind of the selfish side of Christmas. You bring in a number of things that people feel, and that human aspect makes this book different from most any Christmas book I have ever seen.
Thank you.
And I know that one of the things that writers do is they bring their heart into the book, and they bring their themes, the things they believe in. There are some clear messages that this book delivers. What are the clear messages that a reader should walk away from this book with?
I think the driving message is probably that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
We're not alone. You may feel like your problems are weighing you down so much and that nobody else is feeling what you're feeling. And that's a very real and honest feeling, and I fully understand it. But for all that you're feeling, everybody else is feeling the same thing for different reasons. And at that time of the year, at Christmas time, everybody kind of comes together anyway because of the season. And if we could take a moment and say, if we could do that all year round and say, you know what, I'm in this with you, and I'm feeling these things, and I feel this pressure, this strain of life, then it's not so bad because you've got somebody else to turn to. And that Christmas is that time of year where everybody comes together. And so there's that, in that we're all in this together. And I think the other, the one you mentioned, the humanity, one of the key lines that I wrote, and I wrote it later on in the process, was Santa says, I may be immortal, but I'm only human. And
great line.
So he's this guy who's lived for thousands of years. He's an immortal figure, but he's flawed, just like we all are. And he says, you know what, I'm not perfect. You may put me on this pedestal as the patron saint of Christmas, but I'm just as imperfect as you are, and I'm going to make mistakes too. But that's okay because I'm in this with you. And for a long time, he sort of admits to that. I looked down on everybody because I felt like I was better than you because of my immortality and my position. But in reality, I've got the same problems that you do. And if we can all be in this together, then Christmas, what Christmas represents, doesn't ever have to go away.
Right. So and that Christmas is more. Christmas is a feeling. It's a mood. It's a lesson.
Yes.
It's something that we should learn from.
Right.
And sometimes we do take advantage of people who are all giving, and we don't stop to think that it's not easy to give and give and give, and it's wrong to take and take and take. So there are some great lessons to be learned from this book. Question: now that you have this book done, you happy?
Very much so. Very much so. And I think through being able to get it out there and share it with people, you were the one who introduced me to the idea of Create Space. And it's freed me up as a writer tremendously, because now I don't think about there used to be, I have to write, now I have to get an agent, now I have to get published, and I got to get the big advance, and I was losing focus on why I love to write, which is I love to tell stories, and I love to share things that are important to me with people in words. And now I can just think about, I can write this and I can put it out there and share it for people to see, and hopefully people will enjoy it and feel the same way that I do. So now that it's out, and now that it's out in this new edition,
I love this new edition.
Yeah, I'm very happy.
Tell me a little bit about that. We have two completely different covers. You started with this cover.
I did.
And you were not happy with it.
No.
And you got some help, and you redid it.
Yes.
And you feel much better about the new cover.
I do, yes. So here's what happened. Last year, I was eager to get the book out in time for the holidays and say, I really just want this book out, and I want to just publish it. And that's that impatience that we talked about earlier on, that sometimes I just want to, that's why I don't make an outline. I just want to get it out there.
Yep.
And so I put the book together, and I put it in a Word document, and I formatted it for Creative Space, I slapped the cover on it, and I got it out. And that doesn't mean I didn't like the cover that I did ultimately. I liked it, and I think there's still something to be said about it, but it didn't, when the dust settled in January after the holidays, and I sort of took stock of everything, and I said, the book could be better. It could look better. It could read a little bit better. There are some editorial changes into the text, and it could just feel more like a real book, for lack of a better word. So, I went to this artist in Scotland who was recommended by Jennifer Ciata, who's been on your show.
Been on the show.
Yes, and named Kit Foster, and he did a tremendous job. We bounced ideas back and forth over the course of the summer, and he sent me this design, and we worked with it, tweaked it, and got it to where it needs to be. And then Robert Brown Butler, who I believe has also been on your show, helped me with the interior using Quark to make the book look a lot better. And as you'll see on the inside, he added some design elements, some other things that just kind of make the book pop a little bit more.
Well, you've done a wonderful job with it. I love the book. I've read it cover to cover. I've read it to my own grandchildren. They loved it too.
That's great.
They've met you. They were thrilled to meet the author of this book. They were a little appalled at the fact that Santa would call off Christmas. They were very upset.
Yes.
We are going to make an appearance together.
Yes.
We will be going to Barnes & Noble over at the Cortland Center, Cortland Town Center, on October 21st from 1 to 3. And you'll be able to talk to people who might want to learn more about the book, want to talk to you about some of the things we talked about here today.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to that. Is there another book coming?
Yes, actually, I have a book that is finished. It's a totally different type of book. It's a thriller mystery called The Sorrows, about a widowed reporter who comes to a small town that's kind of not that dissimilar from Carmel in New York, and it's a town that has a lot of secrets, and she comes to this town to sort of get away from her grief, and slowly begins to discover the secrets that are hidden beneath the layers of this town.
What will that book be called?
The Sorrows.
The Sorrows.
Yes.
We're going to look for The Sorrows.
Yes.
You're going to look for us at Barnes & Noble. You're going to read Calling Off Christmas.
Yes, please.
And we're going to thank you for being with us here today. It's been a pleasure to have you, Jeremy.
Pleasure being
What
here.
a treat.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And join us again for Let's Talk Writing.